Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning into Halo's second virtual concert presentation for our current series, Race and RealTalk, Sharing Spaces. For our first quarter in December, we shared a program with you which reflected our group's process on the subject of systemic racism and what keeps us apart. For our second quarter, we expanded from this discussion to the subject of the consequences of separation and explored the tensions of racism and the disconnects on issues of intersectionality. As in December, this program is a reflection of the group's process and discussions, structured and co-facilitated by the clinical leadership of myself, a board-certified music therapist, and Niambi Powell, a licensed clinical social worker. Using music and a variety of media materials for our dialogue, we explored the following questions regarding various facets of intersectionality. How can a history we don't know actually hurt us? What could greater collective awareness do for the socio-political impact of our efforts? And what resources could be made available to us in times of personal and community distress when we are connected through solidarity? We hope our program will take you on a bit of this journey with us, and the divisions among the masses of our society and within the outskirts of the most marginalized and vulnerable groups certainly seems to have kept us on the same path, headed in different directions and stifled by ignorance and isolation.
Walk down that lonesome road all by yourself. Don't turn your head back over your shoulder and only stop to rest yourself when the silver moon is shining high above the trees. If I had stopped to once or twice, if I had closed my mouth, if I had cooled my head and warmed my heart, I got beyond this road tonight. Carry on, carry on, carry on. Feel unsorry for yourself. It doesn't save you from your troubled mind. Walk down that lonesome road all by yourself. Don't turn your head back over your shoulder and only stop to rest yourself when the silver moon is shining high above the trees.
Race and Real Talk.
Sharing spaces.
Let's talk about intersectionality and how racism hurts everyone.
Most people can't tell the difference
This land
between a Korean,
is stolen.
Chinese,
The rights to
Filipino
this land.
It's like we have to compete for attention in this culture of white supremacy.
Governing bodies of predominantly white men make planning decisions without considering the history of
That's not feminism.
If we share
They're
the pain,
pitting us
we can share
against
the power.
each other. That's literally how white supremacy works.
Dwayne, I've been cheated. Dwayne, been mistreated. Dwayne, when will I be loved? I've been pushed out. I've been pushed out. When will I be loved? When I find a new hand that I want for mine, it always breaks my heart in two. It happens every time. It happens every time. I've been lied to. When will I be loved? I need some love. You know that I've been cheated. You know I've been mistreated. So tell me when will I be loved? I get cheated every time I find my new man, by my new man that I want for mine. It always breaks my heart in two. It happens every time. It happens every time. I need some love. You know that I've been cheated. You know I've been mistreated. So when will I be loved? When will I be loved? When will I be loved? I need some love. When will I be loved?
Model minorities can quickly become targets and can feel invisible to the mainstream as a meaningful identity.
And in addition to their invisible identity, their experiences from psychological, emotional, and physical harm from racism goes unacknowledged.
Now Asians have become again a primary target of verbal and physical abuse.
While anti-Semitism is still real, there was a time when Black Jews and now white Jews were considered the same. And then once whiteness was an attainable identity, the cultural solidarity that was there is now lost, and Black Jews remain invisible.
the focus of racism is always shifting. It went from anti-Middle Eastern to anti-Hispanic to anti-Asian, with the constant undercurrent of anti-Blackness.
It's like we have to compete for attention in this culture of white supremacy.
If one group is unsafe, all groups are unsafe.
Dismantling racism is going to require all marginalized communities of color to stand in solidarity.
You're valued based on your proximity to whiteness.
People of mixed heritage can feel that they are not part of any group, like they don't belong anywhere.
There's light-skinned privilege, but as soon as you open your mouth, the white people know.
You have curves, so you may be Latina, but you don't walk through the world like I do.
I don't get to choose if or when I'm seen as a black woman.
Freedom, I love freedom, whoa, freedom, freedom is.
The pandemic has disproportionately affected the lives of women of color, who are disproportionately of lower socioeconomic status and primary caregivers in their household.
Even decisions based purely on money, like qualifying for loans, weigh against women of color, especially black women, who are the lowest earning segment of the black-white man-woman quadrant.
We know the talking point that white women on average make about 80 cents on the dollar compared to their white male counterparts, but black women make about 60.
Women of color will rightfully say, I don't feel part of the women's movement because I don't feel like they're fighting for me.
Affirmative action programs intended to advance both racial and gender equity without enough attention to structural racism have largely benefited white women.
All this talk about feminists fighting for abortion and corner offices does nothing for me when I worry about my children going to bed hungry and us having a place to live.
Women of color being assertive in white or white female-dominated spaces where people aren't used to hearing them speak up. This comes at a cost of mental energy and social capital. And then they won't speak up sometimes for the sake of self-preservation.
Women of color to varying degrees, but across the board, especially for African American, Latina, and Indigenous women of color, are less likely to have healthcare, more likely to die in the hands of the healthcare providers, and somehow more likely to be diagnosed with diabetes rather than depression.
Women of color, black women, Latina women, Asian women, women from all over the world are exoticized, dehumanized, hypersexualized, fetishized.
And acts of violence against black women are not responded to in the same way as against white women.
Which is part of why, while the vast majority of rapes are reported by white women, women of color are more likely to be assaulted. Why report when you can't trust law enforcement?
Bree Black, Raya Milton, Dominique Fells.
How can it be that people don't recall the names of so many BIPOC women who have been killed in senseless police violence?
Lee Golden, Gabriella Nevarez, Yvette
And
Smith,
trans women of
Bernicia
color.
McBride, Miriam
Look at how many black trans women get killed every year.
Brooklyn,
We have to say their names. We have to know their story.
Mia Green,
Nina Pop,
Ariane,
Bree Black, Janisha Fonville, Raya Milton,
Ariane.
A person can be Asian and transmasculine. They could be black, Muslim, and bi. So many identities can exist in one body.
It's a choice, some people say. Tell that to the gay kids who get kicked out of their house because they can't hide who they are. Kids.
Queer and trans people of color, especially trans women of color, face the worst violence, the most barriers to opportunity, and the least societal support.
A lot of communities and families of color, with religious institutions being the glue that holds them together, just don't accept their queer kin.
Intersectionality, racism, and the immigrant experience in a racist society all further complicate the experience of growing up and finding one's true identity.
All of these issues of class and race and the intersections of oppression are largely ignored by the white male centers of power that dominate these movements. They ignore these issues and the people who are affected by them while simultaneously appropriating contributions of the BIPOC queer community.
These issues require educators, health, and social services to be trained and educated from the lenses of cultural awareness, sensitivity, and humility.
Queer and trans BIPOC youth are more likely to be imprisoned for any number of infractions and for longer sentences, and the staff serving them isn't trained to work with them and meet their needs. So they're left on their own, isolated, probably worsening whatever they were struggling with that got them there in the first place.
Institutions could be focusing on the trauma of LGBTQ+ and BIPOC people and their actual needs instead of arbitrary laws and punishments.
For so many women, trans, and queer people of color, all of this is literally a matter of life or death. We cannot remain ignorant and silent on the issues of race and class that intersect with these identities.
Brianna Taylor,
Brianna Tanisha Fonville, Diana Jeffress McKenna, Charlena Siobhan Miles, Tanisha Anderson, Corrine Gaines, Aura Rosalia Kager, Sandra Shanique Proctor,
Megan Hockaday,
Alexi Christian,
Janisha Fonville,
Michelle Kaya Hall.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk to you again because a vision softly creeping left its seeds while I was sleeping, and the vision that was planted in my brain still remains. It's in the sound of silence. In the restless dreams I walked alone, narrow streets of cobblestone, neath the halo of a street lamp, I turned my collar to the cold and damp. When my eyes were stabbed by the flash of a neon light that split the night and touched the sound of silence. I look inside myself and see my heart is black. Those flowers and my love are never coming back. Maybe I could fade away and not have to face the fact. Not easy to facing up when your whole world is black. I wanna see it black. I see your red black, black as night, black as cold as the sun. No colors any more than the sky. I wanna see it painted. I see your red black, black as night, black as cold as dark. No colors any more than black, black. Fools, I said you do not know. Silence like a cancer grows. Hear words
Imagine you're a black person living in a neighborhood where they cut down all the trees so that the police could surveil your community. Decades later, some white folks come knocking at the door saying, "Hey, we want to plant some trees."
Thanks, but no thanks. I already can't breathe.
These places Black and Indigenous people call their homes aren't considered actually theirs. Planners will come, decide what's needed, make changes to the neighborhood, and even remove these people that live there without their informed consent.
Colorado mining has led to high levels of uranium in Navajo residents. And what does this mean? Kidney damage, respiratory damage, which does not pair well with the COVID pandemic.
Geographically, it of course appears that Colorado is a long way from Flint, Michigan. But when you look at the similarities of the communities that damage like this to the environment affects, it's just around the corner.
These parallel experiences of Black and Indigenous people and their communities can help us to recognize environmental racism, like us being 3 times more likely to live near landfills instead of playgrounds.
And 3 times more likely to die from exposure to that pollution.
Water rights are a Black issue. They are an Indigenous issue.
This pollution and injustice is the long-standing history of policies that harm Black and Indigenous people, of things being done to people, not with or for the people.
History matters. What happened in the past impacts reactions and continued actions of the present. The people living in these communities need and deserve to be included in the decision-making process from the beginning, not as a house call with an already drafted contract to sign.
And white supremacy is the assumption that white people have the right to take what they want and use what they want, anywhere they want, anytime they want. It's how they run the world, but it's not how the planet works.
This is true all over the world. Farmers in Borneo are constantly under pressure to replace their crops with the monoculture of palm for the palm oil large producers. They know it's destructive, but they're desperate to provide for their families.
That song, "This Land is Your Land, This Land is My Land," definitely makes some people's skin crawl. We have to acknowledge the original crimes and ensure that new narratives, more truthful ones, begin to form new histories for people living together on this land, and then design ways to right the original wrongs.
Racism has disconnected us from each other and from the earth. We must speak truth to the injustice of environmental racism through solidarity and the power of our inseparable connection.
You think you own whatever land you land on. The earth is just a dead thing you can claim. But I know every rock and tree and creature has a life, has a spirit, has a name. You think the only people who are people who look and think like you. But if you walk the footsteps of a stranger, you learn things you never knew. Have you ever heard the wolf cry to the blue corn moon? Or ask the grinning bobcat why he grinned? Can you sing with all the voices of the mountain? Can you paint with all the colors of the wind? Can you paint with all the colors of the wind? Ooh. Come run the hidden pine trails of the forest. Come taste the sun-sweet berries of the earth. Come roll in all the riches all around you. And for once wants, never wonder what they're worth. The rainstorm and the river are my brothers. The heron and the otter are my friends. And we are all connected to each other. In a circle, in a hoop that never ends. How high does the sycamore grow? If you cut it down, then you'll never know. And you'll never hear the wolf cry to the blue corn moon. For whether we are white or copper-skinned, we need to sing with all the voices of the mountain. We need to paint with all the colors of the wind. You can own the earth and still all alone is earth until you can paint with all the colors of the wind. Ooh, paint with all the colors of the wind.
If so many groups of marginalized people are walking down that lonesome road, if we stop and listen, can we find each other?
Colonialism is rooted in separating minority groups through amplifying our differences. Dialogue among us can lead to validation, connection, sharing of resources.
Black women organizers like Stacey Abrams helped make it possible for thousands of BIPOC to vote when they otherwise wouldn't have. We can not only lead, we can bring people together to make their voices heard.
It's already the labor of Black queer women that have led to the benefits white queer men now claim. If we center the most marginalized within the queer community, that will mean the movement doesn't stop until all within the community have rights, safety, and acceptance.
There are organizations like Dig Deep that are dedicated to closing the water gap, bringing clean, hot, and cold water to all American homes. It's community-led, and that makes a major difference in the work that gets done.
For any of us to truly be free, all of our stories must be told.
Everyone's story matters. Marginalized communities and identities experience oppression in different and sometimes separate ways. But we can work to educate ourselves, educate one another, and work together toward the common goal: dismantle white supremacy.
With 2 wings, we can soar through the air. With 2 wings, we can go most anywhere. With 2 wings, we can sail through the sky. With 2 wings, we can fly. With 2 wings, we can soar through the air. With 2 wings, we can go most anywhere. With 2 wings, we can sail through the sky. With 2 wings, we can fly. I am one with soul and color. By myself, all I can do is flutter. I'm only one wing, I need the other for the developers to fly. I am one wing, saving another. By myself, all I can do is flutter. I'm only one wing, I need the other for the developers to fly. With 2 wings, we can soar through the air. With 2 wings, we can go almost anywhere. With 2 wings, we can sail through the sky. With 2 wings, we can fly. I am one voice, I am another. I'm part of the world, and we are the other. When we learn to work together, then the double peace will fly. With 2 wings. reach the sky with two wings. We can fly with two wings. We can soar through the air with two wings. We can go almost anywhere with two wings. We can sail through the sky with two wings. We can fly with two wings. We can fly with two wings. We can fly. 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 We can fly so high. Together we can fly so high.
Thank you for watching our program. Very special thanks to Cliff Shoemaker and Manoj Podkey for their generosity in collaborating for our sound and video work. And we would also like to extend our deepest gratitude to the incredible artist Jude Wilson, who created the beautifully detailed drawings of the women and trans women whose lives were tragically cut short by violence for which justice has yet to be served. We invite you to join the members of HALO and the Race and Real Talk Ensemble for our Afterglow reflections, questions, and some dialogue at 9:30 p.m. EST. That's tonight, Saturday, March 20th. You'll find the link for registration on our Facebook page and in the video description on YouTube, along with a link where you can offer donations to HALO Incorporated to support our continued work, and half of the proceeds raised from tonight until April 1st will be shared with the organization Women of Color Advancing Peace and Security to support more good work promoting solidarity, safety, and sustainability for all. Good night.
Bum bum bow, ba-da-da, ba-da, bum bum bow, ba-da-da, ba-da.
A little less conversation, a little more action, please. All this aggravation ain't satisfaction in me. A little more bite, a little less bark, a little less fight, a little more spark. Close your mouth and open